welcome to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast, where we talk about what life is really like as a sibling to someone with special needs. I'm your host, Charlene, and today our guest is Freya. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on. Could you lay out your family structure, like your birth order, and then what disability your sibling has?
Of course. So, start off, my name is Freya, and I am the oldest of three siblings. So, I have two younger brothers. My youngest brother, Ian, he has autism. And with his autism, he is verbal, but he does struggle a little bit with structuring conversations and social cues and things like that. But his sense of humor always shines through in any conversation in any room. So, that's always something that I really admire, and he always makes me laugh without
Yeah.
fail.
Oh, my sister too. Like she always cracks me up, and it's funny because my sister, like, she it fascinates me now because she's always been more nonverbal in general, just like, so her kind of, like, we used to use PECs for a long time.
Yeah,
Does
yeah,
and
we have that
then
as well in our house.
Yeah, so we used
Yeah.
that, and we made this transition when she was younger to go from when she started doing speech therapy. My parents kind of transitioned her out of PECs into more talking because they
Hmm.
saw that, like, if we never got out of PECs, she would have never just started using her words to,
Yeah.
vocalize anything.
Hmm.
And so we used to try to, like, have these like formulaic sentences where it's like, I want apple juice and things, kind of stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so what became really interesting though is, I guess for her, she just associated, like, the sentence as a transaction. She didn't associate that as her communicating those specific words, like,
Yeah.
individually. And so she
Yeah.
got into this thing where she would, like, zip through a whole sentence just because she knew that as long as she kind of, like, said all of the 6 words, we would give her the thing
Yeah.
instead of, yeah.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
now it's kind of this thing where because she knows she doesn't have to do that, she just says one word as a transaction. But what's
Brilliant.
funny is that it's kind of like done an inverse thing where her, like, communication development has increased. So she now
Hmm.
understands, like, she can say more words, like, in
Hmm.
terms of, like, participating and, like, making us laugh and, like,
Yes.
illustrating idea. But the problem is, like, she doesn't have the vocabulary anymore because she's
Hmm.
stopped using, like, learning all the words.
Yes.
So she's trying to, like,
Yes.
illustrate more complex topics, but with a
Hmm.
very limited vocabulary.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That actually reminds me with my brother, like that teaching him how to communicate with us and stuff.
Mhm.
So we would be like, "Oh, do you want an apple juice?" And he would be like, "You want an apple juice?" Instead of saying, "I want an apple juice." So
Mhm.
he started to notice little things like that in the way he would communicate, like with his words and stuff. He's like, "As long as I say something similar to what they're saying to me, surely I'll get what I want."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and then he just started to have it being like, "You want this?" And then I would have a little joke with him and be like, "Oh no, I'm fine. I don't want that. Thank you." And he'd give me such a look of like, "But I want it. But I want it." And I'm like, "You gotta say I want it."
Yeah.
And so I like me and my brother have that relationship where like we're always kind of like making little jokes with each other, and like we have a very like funny like sense of humor with each other, which I really like.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time when people hear like, "Oh, you have an autistic brother," they have like a certain picture in their head.
Yes.
But like I love that our relationship is a sibling relationship first and foremost.
Oh, that's
So we can have
awesome.
that, yeah, so we can have that fun, we can bounce off each other, we can mess around. And so I really do appreciate that side of our relationship as well.
Yeah, that's so fun. What's your age difference between you and him?
So he is 15 and I'm 24. So there's 9 years.
Okay. That's a decent amount to, like, just so,
Yeah.
but which I'm glad that, like, I'm glad that there's, like, humor is one of the, like, dominant factors of, like, your relationship, because that
Hmm.
could be just because that could be so easily like, oh, I'm just, like, big sister, and, like, it could be
Yeah.
very much that
Hmm.
way. No, that's so
I
fun.
think, yeah, I think because I grew up in a house where like humor was always something that me and my family bounced off each other in. And it was
Mm,
nice that he was able to pick up that and like join in on it and not be left out. So like he like little things that he'll come out with that I've learned from me or from my brother, and
yeah.
like he gets sassy with our parents sometimes as well and stuff. And it's just like the little things he remembers. I'm like, you little sticky pup. Like it's so funny hearing him and how he can
Yeah.
get out of like it's like if he wants to leave you ask him to leave his dishes out, he just kind of gives you these like he rolls his eyes or he looks sideways at you as if like I'm not doing that. Like he's just so sassy and I just love it about him.
Yeah, that's what it's like. Yeah, I'm not doing that. He's like, you can try to make me do it. Still gonna just sit here. Like, yeah.
Literally, yeah, he's like, no, I
Yeah.
heard you, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, that's so good.
Mhm.
On the podcast, we like to keep it pretty open forum, and all topics are welcome. Is there any topics in particular you would like to talk about today?
I suppose it's actually just really nice to like chat to another sibling about like everyday life and like what growing up was like, especially because
Mm-hmm.
I felt like my teenage years, especially, were quite different from say my peers' teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up, especially being that bit older than my brother and that bit of an age gap,
Yeah.
um, I was going through puberty and he was going through like his diagnosis and starting school and stuff. So we were both keeping big milestones.
Yeah.
And I'm always curious of how other siblings kind of went through their own puberty and their own experiences of high school and what that was
Mm.
like for them while having a sibling that was getting a diagnosis or who was starting school or who was having struggles at like reaching different milestones and stuff. So that's
Yeah.
definitely an area that I'm always interested in talking about.
Yeah. So my sister, so I'm 2 years older than her. She got diagnosed around 3, so I would have been like 5 at the time.
Yeah.
So, but if we jump to like my middle school, high school
Mhm.
years, I think middle school was like the roughest out of the
Yeah.
between those two. I think middle school was definitely the most like I didn't yeah, I was just very confused and all of that because like yeah, because like with starting puberty and because I had attended private school for like all my like low like elementary. So up until 5th grade, I was just in a private, or up to 4th or 5th grade, I was in a private school. And then I switched to public school. So not only was it
Mhm.
like like you're just switching schools in general, but like it's like this whole, it's so different, right? Because it's just like
Yeah.
there's just things that I feel like the culture shock was very real because it was like all this stuff that's like,
Yeah.
wait, like what is half of this stuff? I don't understand half of
Mhm.
the TV shows people are talking about, or like where people get their clothes, and I don't understand
Yeah.
like yeah, like and then when people would pass notes, I'm like I don't understand, like I didn't like passing notes I understood, but I didn't understand half of the stuff that
Yeah.
was in there because I'm like because people had like their own like slang of
Like
stuff, and I
slang.
was like
Yeah.
I don't get it,
It is.
yeah, and then it was
Yeah.
hard because by that time I had a pretty like concrete understanding that we didn't have people over at our house. And I
Mhm.
and it's over time as I've talked to different siblings, I've realized that there's a couple of other factors that played into it, not just my sister.
Yeah.
Um that kind of prevented people from coming over. But I think that's what made it hard because it's like it never put me in the position where like, oh, do you want to come over? Even though I lived like 7 blocks away from school, so it only took me like 15 minutes to walk home,
Yeah.
right? And we all live, and then a lot of my friends, we all lived kind of in the same neighborhood, so it's
Mhm.
interesting, right? That like you would think like as a normal or like stereotypically you would think like, oh, as a normal kid you would just have like you would walk home with your friends or whatever, but like I didn't
Yeah.
have that, which kind of felt strange, and then it was hard because it's like if I tried to talk about my sister, then it's like people kind of don't get it. People do get it.
Yeah.
There was a what is it? Like a like it was like a special ed class, right, that had kids with
Yeah.
various disabilities, right? And
Mhm.
so my saving grace, not saving grace, is like people interact, like I knew some of those kids just because they did this thing where the in my 6th grade class, there was a kid that like was in our class that had a disability. So
Yeah.
it was this very strange, comforting thing to me because I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm fine, but it made me feel awkward at the same time because I was like, oh man, like other people have to then like learn this situation,
Yeah.
which was weird. Yeah, so I think it's just mostly
Mhm.
awkward. To sum it up, obviously
Yeah.
you got the yeah,
No, I
yeah,
get it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I think for me, like that, yeah, it was like you understood things and saw things from different perspectives in like social situations, and especially that like we had a few kids as well that would have had additional needs in my school as well, and like
okay,
even just like you could see like different social situations play out, or you just had a different perspective on some situations and some things in school and during that period in your life. and then trying to communicate that to somebody who may not fully be able to grasp it, and for you, you're like, this is so second nature to me. I don't know how to explain it to them.
Yep.
Like I'm just picking it up. Like I just understand what's going on here,
Yeah.
and even then picking it up in like peers, like maybe like certain like behaviors that are associated with autism, like you might be able to see them in your friends or you see them in other classmates, and you're thinking,
Yeah.
I'm picking up something here, and like it's funny how that kind of just comes to you naturally. How you in social situations you kind of can read that a little clearer than your
Yeah.
peers might. Um, and I know even for like myself, like that as well with like routines at home and stuff, and
Mhm.
with friends and things like that. Like for my brother, especially at such a young age, like he really thrives on having a routine. So like
Yeah.
when it was his bedtime and stuff, our house would kind of go into like quiet down mode. So
Yes.
everybody was kind of God had to go to bed. Not really had to go to
Yeah.
bed, but
Oh
like
no,
had
I
to
had the
spend
same
the
thing.
evening.
Like literally, yeah.
Yeah,
Once she was in the
yeah.
room, it's like, all right, everyone, just go. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
literally
Yep.
everyone's quiet, no
Yep.
speaking kind of thing. Yeah. So like staying out late and friends and stuff, like I didn't want to do it because I feel bad because I'm thinking if I'm late coming home, it's not like my parents ever pushed me to be like home at certain times or stuff.
Mhm.
Like still having a routine for myself and acknowledging that I was a bit older and I need to like go out with friends and do stuff, like still giving me my social life. But I always kind of felt bad if I wasn't home when he needed to go to bed because I knew for his routine he'd say goodnight to all of us, and if I wasn't
Yeah.
there, he wouldn't sleep because he'd be like, "Oh, where's Freya? When's Freya coming home?" And
Okay. Yeah.
you
Cause
know,
like
then
you're
he'd
part
get
of
a bit
the
antsy.
missing. Yeah, you need to be there in order for him to like close the. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah, exactly. So then I'd be conscious of that. Then I'd want to come home early, and so I suppose that always like played on my conscience. And then saying to my friends, "Oh, I need to be home because my brother's going to bed," they kind of like, "Why? Like, why do you need to be home for your brother going to bed?" They couldn't fully understand it. So
Yeah.
that was something that, as I was learning kind of how I wanted to live my life with that bit more independence, I was also trying to balance myself being at home and being out with friends at the same time.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of new learning for me that I didn't expect to have either as a teenager.
Yeah. Oh, that learning curve is so hard. I feel like I hit that
Hmm.
more in like I'm trying to think when I hit that. I think I felt it more when I was like in I felt like when I was in college, I felt it. Which
Hmm.
is interesting because like I went to schools that were within driving distance of like where we lived, but like there was a point when I was doing more like when I was closer to finishing school where I would just live somewhere else. Right, so
Hmm.
you just pay
Yeah.
rent and then but I would come home during the weekends. So
Yeah.
it was this interesting thing where like it was so weird. I think it hit me because like when I wasn't home I got to be this person and then I came home and I
Hmm.
had to be this person
Yeah.
because yeah, because all your habits just fall back and it's interesting because I
Hmm.
realize now because now I live like an hour and a half flight from where my sister lives. So we don't
Hmm.
like live in the same state or anything anymore right now.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because right now it's kind of like it's I because I have my own space to figure stuff out like it's different but I
Yeah.
realized like at I didn't realize at the time in college like that was like my mini version of like my self-identity crisis, right? Cuz you're like wait,
Yeah.
I don't have to do these things when I'm by myself. I don't have to like make sure like all the cabinets are closed and I can put my laundry wherever and I don't have to like eat these specific food or like I can eat foods that my sister doesn't like because she's not here. Right? So I can
Yeah.
kind of buy I can
Yeah.
buy all these things and like she won't like rip the
Hmm.
tags off of them and use scissors, right? Like I kind of could do all this
Yeah.
other stuff
Yeah.
where but then I would go home, every 5 days. Like yeah, after 5 days I would go
Hmm.
home and then be like, "Oh, I guess I'm just going to live back how I used to be." Yeah, so it was just this back
Yeah.
and forth of like which I
Hmm.
now realize I'm like that's so tiring. Like I don't know how I did that. It wasn't tired. Like I'm tired imagining myself redoing that like
Yeah.
in the past.
Yeah. You know what? I actually had a very similar experience to you as well because when I went to university, like that, I was away for 5 days and I would come back in at the weekend.
Mhm.
And I found that as well, like even like when you would go out with friends or you'd even, be out over at a friend's house late at night, like after college, and you're like, I can do this. I don't have any obligation to get home at a certain time. I don't
Yeah.
have a routine I gotta follow.
Yeah.
Like that, you're figuring yourself out and you're like, you have all this freedom and you're almost like, I don't even know what to do with this. I'm so used to like a structured routine being in house.
Yep.
And then yeah, and then you'd go home on the weekends, and you just fall back into it. It's like you never even left. And
Yeah.
everything would just come back to you, and you'd
It,
remember the routine and the do's and the don'ts and the
yeah.
triggers and everything. It would just fall back naturally, and then it was on cycle for 4 years like that. It's crazy.
No, yeah, and it's and like the level, and it's so crazy because it's like now as an adult, like I'm much more like aware it's happening. Like when I visit, right? Because I don't see her that often because I have to like fly over there or we have to drive like
Yeah.
10, 11 hours, right? And it's like, I'm much more aware. Like my body can feel it, my brain is like I'm very much aware that my habits are changing. But like
Yeah.
in college, like it was just like this. Like it was like a
Yeah, literally,
switch,
go,
and
go,
you
go.
like it's so subconscious to a
Mhm.
level that like
Yeah.
yeah, like you didn't even question it. You're like, yeah, it's just how it works. Like you just live kind of live
Literally,
alternate
yeah.
lives. Yeah,
It's crazy. And then I'd come home and I'd be telling my mom about my week in college, and I'm listening to myself and I'm like, oh my god, like that was crazy.
yeah.
I just did all that in my week. Like what?
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
oh, I
it's
stayed up till
mad.
like 1 a couple of days in a row, then I visited all these people and I went out to these things, and it's like, oh yeah, like that's
Yeah.
but it's like that's normal, but then it's like, oh, like but and it's crazy, right? Because it's like this whole thing of like your parents have this expectation and then your sibling has this other expectation, and you're like, well, I'm not either of those things,
Yeah.
but I don't know how to appease both of you at the same time.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes it's just easier than when you're going home during that period. It's like I'm just gonna fall into old habits. It's just
Yeah.
subconsciously like it's just easier. Let's just fall into
It
it. But
it
like
is easier. Like it was
yeah.
it's I can't even tell you that like I think even as at a younger age, there are just some fights that are just not worth fighting. There's really not.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I would be so curious if you felt that like with your other brother, that's
Mhm.
typical. Like if you felt like there were certain fights that aren't worth it versus like with your parents and stuff. Like I don't know if that's different with like other
Mhm.
typical siblings and stuff.
Yeah, it's you know what, it's funny because growing up, like me and my brother, when we'd have like little fights, we'd have them silently. We would want to upset our divergent brother.
Okay.
So my neurotypical brother would have fights and we'd be like whispering and we'd be like going with like the hand signals. So we'd be doing it behind his back, so he wouldn't even be aware because we're like we don't want to upset him because he would get quite anxious if people would like get upset
Oh,
and he would feel
interesting.
our emotions. Yeah.
Okay.
So especially like if you were to cry, he would like get really anxious, hand you a tissue, like make sure you're okay. Like
Oh,
he's very empathetic to other people, so we would never want to like upset him.
yeah.
So if we were fighting, we would have to like do it secretly in like another room or something. Like or sometimes we'd be like, it's not even worth it. We're just
Yeah.
gonna have to agree to disagree on this one and just kind of.
Yeah, just to
But
like
then
move on type
just
of
keep the
thing.
peace. Yeah, and then it'd be so funny because if we went out in public and say like somebody was kind of staring or making comments about our brother,
Mhm.
the way the two of us would like really quickly turn into bodyguards and we're like, try it again, look at him again. Like we would be ready. We were like, no,
Yeah.
we're protecting him to the ends of the earth. Like nobody's getting a stare in. Like he's not going to see any of this.
Oh, 100%.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, and I feel I'm very privileged to have another brother that I can like talk to and that we can have like that similar experience growing up. Like we do still have a little bit of an age difference. So he was because he is younger than me
Mhm.
and he was in the middle of between the two of us. So he had me getting older and his brother on the other side of him who was also like going through that diagnosis, going through school and
Yeah.
you know, a little bit of middle child syndrome I suppose as well.
Yeah.
So but it's good that we could still have those like shared memories and those shared experiences because like I don't know how you would feel maybe as like being the only sibling to your sister. Do you find that there was maybe like loneliness around that?
Yeah, it's definitely like it's been interesting as I've thought about that more now as I've met kind of more people like yourself who kind of have like a mix of like
Yeah.
neurotypical and neurodiverse siblings.
Mhm.
And like it's yeah, like I think I think there were points in time where like it didn't bother me because I was like, oh, it's fine. Like I'm just happy to have my sister just because like my sister's like it's funny, right? We can like still connect and like it's not like she like hates me or anything, right? So it's we can still connect and that was
Mhm.
cool. And I think like it's I think the parts where I felt it the most is when
Mhm.
I started to have feelings and emotions that I wanted to talk more. Just because, like, I realized, like, I like to, like, externally process, which I now, you know, as an adult have, like, vocabulary to illustrate that. But I think that what I ended up doing was I ended up just talking to a lot of adults in place of talking to people my age, because I felt at that time, like, as, like, you know, a teenager, that people my age, like, it didn't matter how hard I tried, no one understood how I felt. And I was like, I'm by myself. My parent, you know, your parents are your parents. It's not like they're, you know, not trying or anything. It's just they're your parents, right? They can't be both your parents and your friends all the time. And so I think I latched onto this idea, like, oh, if I talk to, like, other adults, like, I'll be fine. And I think I kind of just told myself that for a really long time until, I think until I got old enough to realize, like, oh, I need like people my own age. But yeah, I think when I look back on it, it's like, it's still pretty sad. It's just really sad because it's like, it was so, like, it felt very lonely, but it's also like, it's kind of one of those things where it's so low that I just can keep burying stuff over it to not acknowledge that that's how I felt. If you understand, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. But yeah, it's not, that part was not fun. It's not, and now, like, it's interesting now because, like, because my sister's also an adult at this point. And so, and I still don't have, you know, another sibling. It's just the two of us, but it's so different because now I have my husband, which is not the same thing as having a brother or a sister, right? But I think the fact that, like, they have their own relationship has helped immensely. And I realized, like, that is something that I didn't know that I needed to see for me to feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
I think even like touching on when you'd mentioned how you had moved state away from your sister, I have moved country as well. So my brother is back in Ireland with my family, and I moved to Scotland.
Okay.
That's where I'm living at the moment. And I find even now, like, there is that, like, that sense of, like, loneliness, or that you're left behind or something, because, like, they're there, they're growing, they're doing their own thing,
Yeah.
and you're, like, away from them. So I feel like I'm sensing a bit of, like, loneliness now, or a bit of, like, feeling left behind, because, like, my mom would, like, you have a family group chat, and mom was like, oh, look, this is what your brother did today, or, like, look, this is what your other brother's doing, and I'm like, I'm missing these moments when I could be there.
Yeah.
And I'm so used to having always been there. Even when I was in college and I'd come back at weekends, I always was there more than I am right now.
Yeah.
And even though I'm getting able to fly home and see them, and I'm quite lucky that, you know, it's a nice quick flight home, it's not too hard to get home, but there's still moments where I'm like, I wish I was there for that. I wish I could have made it home for that, you know. Even like
Yeah.
coming up to Christmas now, I'm thinking like, oh, his Christmas show, like, at school, like, I'm not gonna be able to see that. And I used to go like every year. That was also something that I, like, made an effort to get to, even when I was in college. And
Yeah.
so I feel like I'm sensing, like, especially because I haven't really connected with many, say, siblings like myself here in Scotland. So even I don't have, like, anyone that would understand, that I could talk to about what that experience is like.
Yeah.
Especially because having that younger sibling with a disability or additional needs, having you play such a huge part in their upbringing, and they play such a huge part in yours, and you can feel so protective of them. And now that they're just existing and becoming these adults, and you're not around all the time, it's like, I understand we both need to grow up, but, like, you'll always be my baby brother, and it's just weird that you're becoming this fully grown man right in front of me.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not there for every memory. So, like, that's where I'm kind of feel like now that, like, that loneliness feeling and that left behind feeling is kind of slipping in for me.
And it's definitely like a fear of missing out, like, thing.
Yeah.
Which it's not a fear. I mean, it is really happening. Like, it's not, you know, but it's like, I think at the beginning, when I think I felt it the most when I first moved out, when I got married, which like I wasn't that far away, but I definitely felt it the most at that time, just because that was my first
Yeah.
time like being away for like extended periods of time, not like after 5 days I'll all come back,
Yeah.
like.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it
The
was
extended
such
period
like
of time. Yeah.
it was a very like, and it feels so awkward too, because it's like, because it's this thing where like you're watching both the good and the bad happen to your sibling, right? Because you're watching like
Yeah.
great milestones that they're like achieving, and you're also watching these other things where you're like, wow, like why didn't my parents address that? Because you can see, right, and that part sucks, like that part is bad, right? And it hurts
Yeah.
that way. But like, I know for me, like, over, I think the thing that I like, the best and worst part about being so far away from her for like extended periods of time is that it
Mhm.
gives me space to actually be with myself. Like the
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
myself, that's not the, oh, I want to be this or this. And I think it's,
Yeah.
I know for me it's changed our relationship for the better, because I can show up the way that I want to show up and not the way that I'm expected to show up. And I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
been a real, that's been like the biggest benefit to me,
Mhm.
is I can show up the way that like I've wanted to, that allows her to be her without me trying to put her in a box either, right? Like we're in boxes, they're in boxes, like our parents are, like we're all kind of in these
Yeah.
like weird,
Yeah.
like, it's kind of like when you play Tetris and everyone's like in their own block, but they have to fit a certain
Yeah.
way, right? Because
Yeah.
it's so,
Mhm.
it's just easier, right? It's easier to like, if I
Mhm.
just expect this behavior from you and you just do it, we can just move on, instead of like, oh no, like you're changing and like all these things, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, that's just being a human, but like I think it's more, just more extreme in our cases, just because it's like, you don't want to
Mhm.
rock the boat, right? Like, okay, if she throws a tantrum if I eat this cereal versus if I don't, like, well, why would I just not eat the cereal, right? Then she's not going to throw a fit. Like, why induce
Yeah.
the suffering, you know?
Yeah. No, you know what that reminds me so much of as well is for me, like growing up, I took on that role to almost do as much as I could for him. Like,
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
like that you change kind of your own routine and your own almost kind of push it aside your likes and dislikes. You're like,
Yeah.
this will make him happy, so I will do this. And then when you like that, when you go out and you move away and you live your life and you have that bit more freedom, more independence, you can explore yourself and your own actual life and just like and figure out who you are as a person. So I really resonate with that, and I've been able to explore a lot more of my own passions and stuff and being like, oh my god,
Yeah.
I like this.
That's
This is
awesome. Yeah.
crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I feel the same way.
So yeah. And so I think that it's allowed me then when I do go home that I am just gonna be I am his big sister that's there to just annoy him and like really take on like that more of a sister role for him, still support him and help him where I can, but we get to have that little bit more of like a typical sibling relationship where like if
Yeah.
he's asking me like, oh, can you give me this? And I'm like, you have two arms and two legs, you can go and get it
Yeah.
yourself, like
Yeah.
we can like bounce back with that a little bit because I don't feel like I need to take care of him as much as I used to.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing how much he's able to strive and thrive in school and at home and in his own milestones, even when I am away, gives me the confidence to know that he will always be able, he'll always have supports around him, no matter where I am. He'll always have
Yeah.
people to help him and look after him, and he'll always try. So
Yeah.
it allows me to take that step back of feeling like I have to be a carer and I can be more of a sister.
Yeah, and it's such a nice feeling, like to transition into the like, oh, I can just, yeah, I can exist as a sister, and
Yeah.
like that's fine, like, right, and like obviously like there's
Mhm.
always like, there will be a period of time where it switches back, but like we have a while before we have to hit that, which is, it's nice to just
Yeah.
like, yeah, be in the present, and like I'm gonna enjoy like, yeah, like what's currently happening. It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It makes time at home then a lot more valuable because I'm able to give like all like my other brother and my parents all the same um attention, and like I'm able
Mm.
to like have that relationship with everyone. It's not just kind of all my focus on him. Which I like
Yeah.
that like I can build and keep my other relationships in my life stronger with my family as well.
Oh, that's
You
so
know,
cool. Yeah, because
yeah,
it's like it evens out the like tipping scale where like you can take less weight and then like redistribute the that
yeah,
care. Oh, that's so
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Even like when I go home, like me and my brothers will get in the car, we'll go for a drive, and we'll play some music, and it's something so simple. But for me, I really appreciate that we've all gotten to a point in our life that we can go and do that. Because when he was a younger age, like he's very like codependent with my mom. Like he loves her so much, so
Yeah.
wherever she goes, he wants to go.
Yep.
But now he's getting that independence in himself to just hop in the car with me and my brother, and we can bring him for a drive. So it's good then that my mom can stay at home, have a cup of tea, not be worrying. He's with us. It's nice for all of us that we're
Yeah.
all kind of finding ourselves and being able to be our own people outside of each other.
Yeah, and it's nice because like my sister, so she doesn't even live at home with my parents anymore. She moved like in the fall of 2021. Then she moved
Mhm.
like into her own housing situation. So it's the thing that's been really interesting is like because we moved at the around the same time, so I see her like over like video calls and stuff. And so
Yeah.
it's really interesting even for as short as our calls are, like to see the evolution of like how she exercises her independence versus like when she was like
Yeah.
with my parents, right? Just because like the the codependency is very high in the like just in all like special needs families and stuff. It's just high, right?
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just part of that. I mean, like, and obviously we all have to grow out of it at some point, but
Mhm.
it's been really yeah, it's been really interesting to just observe it like from afar to like watch
Mhm.
like oh yeah, like she just chooses to do these things or like and it's kind of well, okay. It's not fun. It wasn't funny in real time. It's funny now as I tell you the story where I watch her falling back into her habits like when she's with my parents. Right? Cuz she
Mm.
also does that. Like as do I, which like
Yeah.
in real time this is like the worst thing ever. But like when I think back oh like wow, it's hilarious, right? Because it's like even they as their own humans like they just want to
Yeah.
do their own stuff too, right? They're like, leave me alone. I just want to live the life that I want to
Yeah.
live. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, even though my brother like is still in school, he hasn't moved away. But even I noticed that like when he is in school, like because his teachers are teaching him, he has to do it. Like he has to be independent. Like he's learning skills
Mm.
himself. But then
Yeah.
the minute he gets home, he takes his shoes off, puts his feet up, and he's like, "Mom, can you get me this?"
Yeah.
And like he just falls. I'm like, you just spent the whole day doing stuff for yourself. You can do it. You can go get it.
Yeah.
It's funny. They do. They fall back into that routine just as much as we do.
Yeah. And it's so funny because I think one of the like one of the like very earlier times where I got to meet other siblings
Mhm.
was so I was probably like in my early 20s. And so like at that time like interacting with these people it was like kind of like once a year thing and so like we would meet up and then but the thing I remember the most from a particular instance of us talking was like we were talking about one of my friend's sisters where she was able she like knew how to use a fork and a knife and eat breakfast like that wasn't an issue, right?
Mhm.
But her brother was so mad at her because like she keeps asking for help cutting her waffles like not to him but just to other people, right? And he's like you're being ridiculous like you literally do it every day. Like stop, right?
You
Because
don't
it's because
have to
they
do
know because
it.
other people won't call them out on it and they won't challenge the fact that like oh like if you don't know how to use a knife I'll help you, right? But so all of us were just talking about like man like it's so ridiculous, right? Because they all know that they can just abuse the system and just like ask for whatever they want.
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, my brother is the exact same way. Like the stuff he's able to do, and then he'll just be like, "Yeah, I'm not doing it today. I don't want to do it today." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "You can't just decide today to not be independent. That's not how
Yeah.
it works. You have to do what you can do." Like, it's
Yeah.
so funny. Yeah, even like that with like getting himself something to eat in the kitchen.
Uh-huh.
He's so able. He knows where everything is. He knows how
Yeah.
to get it himself. But then if he sees mom walking past, he's like, "Oh, there's somebody who could do it for me," and he'll just ask her to do it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, "No,
Yeah.
you can do it.
Yeah.
Go
When
on."
I used to like babysit my sister, I would always make her do everything because
Yeah.
half the things in her night routine was all stuff that like mostly my mom did, which like on the days where like she just wanted her to like slam through it and like kind of like fast forward time like that those days I understood because like we're all trying to just get to bed. But
Yeah.
other days I was like you know she can do that if you just like waited an extra 5 minutes, like, and like
Yeah,
exercise the patience to do it, like. So yeah, so
yeah,
anytime I babysat, I'm like, no. And she's like
yeah.
this, I'm like, no, like I'll stand here. You can do that. I'll make sure you don't break it, but like you're free to like do it
Yeah,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, literally. Yeah, that's why sometimes even when I come home, my brother like he'll go to ask me something, and then he'll realize he's asking me, and then he's like, he's not even gonna do it.
Yeah.
He's like not wasting my
Yeah.
breath. You can just tell he's like, no, no, no,
Yeah.
no. Because that's it. Like I feel like to a sibling, like because our parents like they're so used to that carer role to just do things for them, but
Yeah.
for us as siblings, we're like, you're not paying us the same way. Like we know what you're capable of. We've seen you do it. You're gonna do
Yeah.
it. That's not our role here. We're your bigger brother
Yeah.
or sister. We're here to just have that fun sibling relationship. We're not here to do things for you that we know you're well able to do.
Yeah.
You
And
know?
that's like that, I'm gonna enjoy that part, like while it lasts. Like it's just, yeah, like not having to like,
Yeah.
yeah, be the person who needs to tell you what to do. I'm like, I'm gonna let you push the boundaries, and then if other people get upset, like that's their, like an external
Yeah.
problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you
And I
want to
think
talk about your blog and stuff?
oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I run a blog called The Diary of a Social Care Worker. Because I recently got my degree in social care practice. But because I am now a qualified social care practitioner and I have a younger brother with autism, I like to bring both of those experiences together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually working out and working with people to being that family on the other side as well. So I get that unique perspective on both sides of the professional and the family. So through my blog, I like to like bring that in and talk about that. And I think it's like really important to remember that like as social care workers, we're supporting these families. Like we're going in and we're like, oh, I have to work this shift, but it's like no, like that's a family you're supporting. That's somebody's life. Like that's there's a family on the other side of that, and I know what it feels like to be that family. And so I'm really trying to like give my platform a space for both of those sides to come together. So
Yeah.
at the moment, I'm running a series called Advice for Social Care Workers, and I bring in like different people from different perspectives of like the whole multidisciplinary team and that whole experience. So
Mm.
the first one was from autistic people themselves, because I feel like they're number one. They are biggest say in all of this. If they're the ones that are going to be cared for, and they're the ones that need that support, their voices need to be heard first and foremost of what the support they would need from us as
Yeah.
professionals. And so I got to talk to some wonderful people through that blog post, and I was very lucky and privileged that they chose to speak through my blog post and share their advice.
Yeah.
And then I reached out to some professionals like speech and language therapists, teachers, some people who work in like yoga and things like that for people with additional needs. And I used um, that platform then to, give them a space to share their advice of what they've learned from working with
Mm.
families and stuff. So the next one that I'm working on, and I'm very lucky that you have agreed to contribute to it,
Yeah.
is from families, so siblings and parents, and having their perspective. And basically, I just want this blog post to be full of just different advice, different perspectives, different understandings, so that as a professional, as a social care worker, when we work with these people, we can remember all these different perspectives and we can bring them into our practice, and we can really see the importance of the work that we're doing in supporting these people and their families.
Yeah. It was interesting because when you gave me like the questions and stuff, I was like thinking about it, and it was funny because, or the thing that was funny to me was that like I remember like the meetings like my parents like had with my sister's social worker like when she was younger. And
Yeah,
it's interesting cuz it's like I don't I don't like remember like specific anything, but I remember like where we sat, where she sat, and like them talking.
yeah,
And it's yeah, it's so fascinating that like at the time, like I just knew she was a social worker, and I knew like, oh yeah, she comes like every, whatever the frequency was that my
yeah.
parents had agreed on to come.
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
and it's interesting because it's like, yeah, I could. And then the other thing I was thinking about was um like through like a mutual friend kind of situation, I had met she's not a social worker, she's a, I'm not gonna explain this well, but she's like one of those job coaches that kind of like
yeah,
you work like one on one with someone with a disability, and you're with them in a workplace, and that like for an
yeah,
hour. Yeah, which I think they do.
yeah.
They have like is that the right term for that? I know they have like it's called something, right?
Yeah. I mean, social care workers, they do that as part of their role as well. It's very common for them
Okay.
to go
I think
on workplaces and stuff.
okay, she wasn't a social care worker because I asked her that, but she said that she was
Yeah,
just doing the like job training part of it.
yeah,
But what I
yeah,
thought
that's
was
it. Yeah,
interesting was like which is why which what I mean that's why to me it was funny because I immediately went to social work because I was like because I was remembering with my sister and like things that me and my parents would talk
yeah,
about versus like oh yeah just her primarily doing the vocation part. I was like oh but it's so similar in the sense of how they're interacting with the family and providing the support and like being able to
yeah,
like work with them individually. Yeah, and it was just
yeah.
it was so and that's a much more recent interaction I had with that
Mhm.
person versus like when my sister like had her meetings and stuff like
Yeah.
with hers like growing up. Yeah.
hmm Yeah, like for me, the reason I went in to get that degree in that line of work was because we used to have this social worker come out and work every week for 2 days a week with my brother when he was before he started school,
Mhm.
and it was to build up his like his basic kind of skills like tabletop activities,
Yeah.
basic numeracy and literacy skills and things like that. And I was so fascinated by her role in his life, and she she's somebody that we're still in contact with to this day. And because she was also good to our family. Like she cared about me, she cared about my brother, she
Yeah.
cared about my parents. She showed care for the entire family and not just the individual she was working with. And even when she would talk about like her other work and like other kids, like the whole role that she played in people's lives, like you could tell she had so much love and passion for it. And
Yeah.
I really like admired that, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be that person for another kid in another family.
Yeah.
So that's why I also wanted to set up this blog, because I think it's so important that for even like siblings like ourselves to have a platform that they could see another sibling who has also been in those situations like you are with the
Yes.
social worker with your sister, that that it's good for that those professionals, that you feel supported by them and that you feel
Mhm.
heard and seen by them as much as your sibling is, because that is that's a memory. Like you had that memory and you'll always have that memory.
Yeah.
It's important that impact and that impression that they give you is a good and a positive one, and that you know that you're supported as well as they are.
Yeah. And it's so interesting too cuz it's like it's something that yeah, it's something I didn't consciously think about, but like as I was answering your questions, a big part of it was like, yeah, it's about you have to be able to provide like support for like everyone, not just the
Yeah,
person with disability. Right? Obviously, there's like scales to that because you can't like
yeah,
be
sales,
everything for
yeah,
everyone. But yeah, the fact that like yeah, I remember she would like make sure she like talked to me. Right? I can't remember
yeah,
anything she said to me at all, but I can remember like interacting with her in a way where I was like, and I think the thing I remember the most is like she made it so that I understood what she was doing
yeah,
and that was the
yeah,
biggest thing, right? Like more so than any like, oh, what's your favorite this, that, or the other, but was like
yeah,
if I had a question, she like would answer
hmm
it. And she could tell
yeah,
me like what was happening in a very like constructive way that
hmm
helped me understand like how she was helping my sister. And I was like,
yeah,
oh, like yeah,
hmm
that's so
and
helpful.
it is so helpful, and it makes such a difference because you feel included. I feel like often with siblings, they kind of
mm,
get pushed to the side
yeah,
because everything goes through the parents, and understandably so. But as siblings, it's nice to be heard and included and seen.
yeah,
And like that, when you have a question and you have uncertainties, which is so natural, to have an adult in that profession that can talk to you in the language you understand, and it doesn't feel so big and scary.
yeah.
It's really important.
And
So
it's nice. It's
that's another.
oh, sorry, you go ahead.
Oh no, I was just that's like another part of like why I just I don't want like the social care system to feel like this big scary thing, especially for younger siblings, kind of
Mm,
growing up with siblings newly diagnosed and stuff. I want them to see that like yes, we're like a professional to your family, but we're also there to support and answer questions and take away that scariness for you of like the unknown in your future as best as we can.
yeah, and I will say like that having that person social care worker or not like to have someone outside of your parental figures
Yeah,
validate and be able to answer questions for you that help you understand that like it's like it's a real thing, right? It's not just
yeah,
like oh in your safety net of your house it's like this whatever, right? But like having because I will say like as a kid, like, she would have been the first adult outside my parents that's not a relative that was able to explain that to me, right?
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that's why I
Mhm.
remember it, right? Because, like,
Yeah.
for my family, like, my parents weren't big on, like, doing like, they weren't big on having anyone come through the house in any form, unless if they, like, were related to us, and even then, there was, like, no therapist that came through or anything that so the social worker was really the only person outside of our
Mhm.
family who, like, was allowed to kinda come into our house for the
Yeah.
time that I remember, right? But
Yeah.
I was like, but I'm like, that's such a yeah, it's so different when you have that, yeah, not your parents say like, hey, like, let me answer these questions and make you feel okay about it, because it's
Mhm.
terrifying. Like, because as a kid, I feel
Yeah.
like for as it's not that that I was scared, but I was just it's just so confusing, right? And your parents,
Mhm.
like, their job is not to explain everything to you, right? Like,
Yeah.
it is their job to explain stuff, but, like, there's a certain level of questions that, they don't even have answers to, and that's what's
Mhm.
hard, right? And that's when social
Yeah.
workers are really helpful because it's like they can answer all those, like, kind of more ominous, like, things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's it, like, you're learning when your parents are learning about when this new diagnosis comes into your house. So
Yeah.
everybody's at that, we're all learning together, and there's only so much that your parents can tell you when there's questions you have that they haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah, that's
So it is
true.
nice to have that other adult that can be like, don't even worry about this. This is going to be okay. You're going to be fine. This
Yeah.
family's just like you. It's, because I remember being so young, being like, does this mean my brother's going to get taken away? Does this mean that he's sick? Does this, I had never heard of
Mm.
autism before. So I had all these questions in my head. And I didn't know what that meant for our family.
Yeah.
So having an adult that could check in with me and being like, how are you doing? And I'd be like, actually, I have this question. Or like, oh, I was thinking about this. And, they're able to reassure me that like having those questions and having those thoughts were completely normal as a
Yeah.
sibling, like it's completely okay to feel this way and to think this way, and like this is the answer to this question, and that was really important, and that was also something that I remembered that that person played in my life, and it was nice that I could see how much help and benefit she was to my brother, but also that she was an adult that I felt safe around as well if I had a question.
Yeah,
I think that was
exactly.
really
Yeah.
important. Yeah,
It's huge.
yeah.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, it's something I've not put, like, any thought into that, like, as I've, like, gotten older. Like, so it's really
Hmm.
interesting, like, to talk with you and kinda, like, circle back to that, like, just at that
Yeah,
time, just because I remember it. Like, because it's
yeah,
just something yeah, it's just and that's something where, like, unless if you're talking to another sibling, doesn't make any sense. Like,
yeah, yeah.
like, it's like, it's just yeah, it's just something yeah, like,
Mhm.
I've gone I feel like as I've gotten older, I've gone through these phases of like, "Oh, I'll tell people everything. Oh, that doesn't work. I'll tell people nothing. That also doesn't work." So I'm like, you're riding this roller coaster of like, who do
Yeah.
you tell what? And
Mhm.
now it's much better. Now I have like more of a system of like, okay, I have like different circles. Depending on which circle you're in, you get this information. And then if you're not in that circle, you
Mhm.
don't get it. So that's fine. Like, but
Yeah,
it's so which is
literally.
just a boundaries thing, like as in right, like having boundaries of like being able to like not have to release your whole thing. And I think like part of that I'm sure is like it's like wanting it's like had I met other siblings when I was younger, probably would have changed the whole world.
Mhm.
Versus like
Yeah.
because I don't think yeah, I had like two friends when I was very young, but then like we ended up just like drifting apart or like, moving and whatever. But like it's
Mhm.
yeah, it wasn't until I was like yeah, like graduated high school, kind of and in college, that's when I like kind of started to meet more. And I was like, oh, like this is
Mhm.
it feels so good to like not feel like I'm
Yeah.
psychotic.
Yeah. Literally, it's like, thank you for confirming I'm not crazy. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Just
Yeah. Yeah. No,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh man. Is there anything else you would like to talk about before uh we go into encouragement?
No, I think I'm pretty happy with all that we've talked about. It's been really nice to just talk to another sibling and be like, oh, she gets it.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
gets
I
it.
love and
Like, yeah.
it's always so like it's always so fun because as for all the hard things we talk about, the amount of laughter is always like always almost exponentially more. So like I love it. I always feel
Yeah.
good, like I always feel better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool. So
definitely.
with that, what are your words of encouragement for all their siblings listening out there?
I think my words of encouragement is don't be afraid to take time for yourself and look after you, because you can't be the best version of yourself for you and your sibling until you put yourself first.
Yeah. I love that. That's
That was,
great.
yeah, that was something that took me so long to figure out, but
Yeah.
I'm glad that I have now because it does make such a difference in our relationship. And
Yeah,
we
and
both
like
really benefit from it.
I feel better as a person. I feel like I show up better. Like
Yeah.
I'm so much more loving to my sister and myself than I ever have been because I took the
Mhm.
time to like be with myself and like take care of me, and
Yeah,
it's very powerful.
absolutely. Even just having your own interests and pastimes and things just for you that you
Yeah.
can do when you want to wind down, like it's so important.
Yes.
It makes such a difference because then we like that when you show up 100%, and you have such a stronger relationship, and you really those little moments really are so precious and they mean so much more to you.
Yeah.
And you can have good memories with them. So yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I've had so much fun.
Thanks for listening to the Special Needs Sibling Podcast. I hope you had a good time listening and feel encouraged in your own journey as a sibling to someone with special needs. If you liked this episode, please share it with your friends. And if you want to hear more stories, please subscribe to the show. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, the show can't happen without you. All special needs siblings have their own unique stories, challenges, family dynamics, and lots of life to talk about and explore. This podcast is here to let you know that you're not alone and that you matter. If you would like to be on the show or just chat off the record, please contact me. My info is in the show notes. Until next time, this is the Special Needs Sibling Podcast.